Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 40 of our reading of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 Unforgettable Explorations into the Realm of the Supernatural, and it is adapted by Walter B. Gibson. Now we are going to go over the copyright information, which should be on your screen right now. As you can clearly see, it says Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone is copyright 1963 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated, and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited is copyright 1964 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated. All rights reserved. This 1983 edition is published by Bonanza Books, distributed by Outlet Book Company, Incorporated, a Random House company, and the address is there if you want it. The book was previously published as two separate works entitled Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited, printed and bound in the United States of America, and the Library of Congress. Information is there if you want it. In the last chapter, we started reading The Ghost Train, but we didn't get very far, so we'll probably just start it all over again, so that we basically know what's going on. We didn't really get, except for a few paragraphs in anyways. So, let's do that. Pete Dunning swung from the Upstate Parkway and pulled in beside the Woodland service station, where a neon sign said Canteen. From behind the wheel, Pete gave Bert Carey a solid elbow to the ribs and told him, "Wake up, coffee break." Bert opened his eyes, stared at a blanket of whiteness that loomed in front of him, and queried, "Where are we? Going up the Iron Mountain ski lift already?" Then Pete informed him, "Is the windshield. The wipers need a new pair of blades because the snow is coming down in big, beautiful blobs. So while the serviceman is fixing the windshield wiper, we'll go to the canteen and have coffee." They went to the canteen, but only Pete had coffee. From the coin machine, Bert settled for milk, saying it would help him go to sleep again, and added that this time he would take the back seat so that Pete couldn't wake him up so easily. Pete, meanwhile, asked the manager of the service station which was the shortest way to Iron Mountain. "I'd stay on the Parkway," the manager declared. "It's the long way, but the sure way. But if you want a shortcut, talk to old Smedley when he finishes installing those wiper blades. He lived around here before anyone ever heard of parkways." Pete talked to old Smedley, whose face was as weather-beaten as the surrounding crags, and whose body was as gnarled as the trees that clung to them. Smedley grinned at the mention of a shortcut. "Turn right at the bridge across the reservoir," he said. "Keep looking for more bridges and go over the second. Take the second road to the right, then one that goes left, but not sharp left. Keep going past the crossroads where the old store used to be." Smedley continued with further directions, frequently correcting himself, until Pete decided that he had it well pegged. Then he and Bert drove off into the blinding storm, which pushed the new wiper blades to the limit. They were crossing the second bridge when Bert spoke from the back seat. "There's a third bridge just beyond here," he said. "It looks as though a line of trucks is going over it. I see their lights." In a glance, Pete noted a row of irregularly spaced lights, all moving at the same rate over the bridge that Bert had pointed out. Then Pete had driven across his own bridge and was trying to pick the route that Smedley had given him. All these roads were still packed with early snow, and as Pete swung along a series of sharp bends, he asked, "Did Smedley say we would hit a crooked road like this?" "I don't remember," replied Bert. "I guess I went to sleep while he was talking to you." Bert's tone was drowsy even now, but before Pete could tell him exactly what he thought of him, a strange distant wail sounded far off in the dark. Startled, Pete asked, "Did you hear that?" "The wind, I guess," responded Bert sleepily. "It howls a lot down through these hills." "Wait," interrupted Pete. "I hear something else. Maybe it's just the crackle of the snow, or it could be my ears cracking, because we're getting high in the hills. But it does sound like bells. Do you hear them, Bert? Jingling bells?" "Jingle bells, jingle bells." Bert went into the old Christmas song, "Jingle all the way." Oh ho! What fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey, hey! That's exactly what they are, Pete affirmed musingly as he applied the brake gingerly. Sleigh bells up ahead, going at just about the same speed we are. He pushed the foot button, bringing the bright lights into play. I'd better slow up, or we'll run into them. Pete swung into a short, straight stretch as he spoke. Straining his eyes through the storm, he added, "That could be it, going up the short rise." Then suddenly the jingle of the sleigh bells was drowned by a louder clangor. Bigger, heavier bells were sounding a mechanical warning, and red lights began flashing, with them revealing a sign that said railroad crossing. The station wagon slewed about as Pete really jammed on the brakes. In one passing glimpse, Pete could have sworn he saw an open sleigh with human figures in it, outlined in the ruddy glare. Then that momentary image was obliterated by a great black bulk, bringing an even louder clamor, and the dong dong of the bell was an old-fashioned steam locomotive. The station wagon was stopped, canted at an angle to the right, and Pete saw the churn of big driving wheels and connected rods carrying the metal monster across the road, a mere 50 feet ahead. There was a brief flare from an open firebox, the blackness of the coal tender, and the the clack, clack, clack of passenger cars. Some of their windows were lighted, but others were completely dark, indicating that those were sleeping cars whose occupants had retired to their berths. But as the dozen cars sped by, Pete Dunning stared in almost complete disbelief. Though a steam locomotive was a decided novelty in the 1960s, passenger cars were commonplace items, but not passenger cars like these. All such cars that Pete had ever seen were painted in colors like black, red, or green, but this entire train, clear from its baggage car back to its old-fashioned observation platform, was painted an absolute white. Gliding through the blizzard, its clatter almost completely muffled by the closed window of the station wagon and the enveloping snow, it was truly a ghost train, the like of which Pete Dunning had never before seen nor imagined. Then the phantom streak of whiteness was gone, and Pete was wondering if he had even seen it. The only evidence remaining was the flashing red light and clanging bells of the warning sign at the crossing. Suddenly both of those were cut off, leaving only a blackened void. Pete backed the wagon and nosed it to the crossing, asking, "Did you see it, Bert? The ghost train?" "I heard a noise like a train," Bert replied, "and I saw some lights like those trucks that were crossing the bridge, but it was all white." "You mean the snow?" "Sure, the snow is all white." "What, would it be green?" Let me go to sleep." Bert's tone faded drowsily as Pete reached the one-track crossing and felt the tires jolt over the rails. Then, as he passed the hump, he braked the wagon again. There, silhouetted in the bright lights, was the figure of a girl wearing a close-fitting bonnet and a flowing coat with full sleeves and a cape collar. Pete rolled down the window on his side and put his head out as the girl approached. Then he heard her plaintive tone. Please take me to my father's home right away. He's ill, and I promised him I'd be back soon. And I left word at the doctor's." "Come around to the other side," said Pete. Then, as the girl complied, he reached over and opened the door. She was inside a moment later, and Pete added, "You really are in a hurry, aren't you?" "All right, which way do we go?" "Straight ahead. To start." The girl was leaning forward, staring through the windshield, and Pete, with brief side glances, noted her straight little nose and rounded chin. "Here's where we turn off to the left." How the girl even guessed the road was there, Pete could not tell, for the snow was driving in with blizzard force. Blindly, Pete picked his way, ready to brake instantly the moment the snow no longer crunched beneath his front wheels. But the moment did not come. Instead, the road actually opened up ahead, through though it was narrow and at times so steep that Pete wondered if his brakes would hold on the slippery surface. Pete darted glances towards the girl beside him, and always she seemed to expect it, and she turned her eyes his way. They were gray eyes, the color of her coat and bonnet, and their gaze was searching, yet understanding. Pete's tone was strained as he asked, "How much further do we have to go, and does it get much worse?" "Only a little way now," the girl replied, "and the worst is over. For me, it was over long ago." "You mean you were worried because no one came along until I finally did?" "There were others who came along." The girl's tone was reminiscent, almost vague then. "Turn sharply here across the covered bridge, then sharply again down the long hill." She didn't specify left and right, but Pete took those directions automatically, as though an invisible hand had swung the wheel. Another glance toward the girl, and this time the dash lights gave a hypnotic glint to her gray eyes. Yet with it he was swept with a surge of sympathy, such as he had never experienced before. "Don't worry about the hill," the girl was saying, "because we are almost there. I'm thankful, and you must be glad that I could help," put in Pete, with another glance. Then, with a whimsical smile, the girl's old-fashioned costume, he added, "I feel, excuse me, I feel as if I were seeing Nellie home." "Your name wouldn't be Nellie, would it?" "No, it's Ethel, and I'm not coming from Aunt Dinah's quilting party. I was seeing Nellie home," boomed an off-key baritone from the back seat. "I was seeing Nellie home. It was from Aunt Dinah's quilting party." "Don't mind Bert Carey," Pete interrupted. "He's just a newspaper photographer who was wished on me, cameras and all." "And your name?" the girl inquired. Pete Dunning, sports writer for the New York Classic. On my way to cover the ski jumping contest at Iron Mountain." "Turn here." The girl's hand pressed Pete's arm. Again he swung the car the way she wanted, this time to the left, though he didn't know why. There are the lights of the house. You can stop in front." Pete pulled into the driveway that terminated in billowy shapes resembling snow-clad trees. The house was on the right, and he stopped beside an open space that appeared to be a walk. By the time he turned to look at Ethel, she had left the car, closing the door so softly that Pete didn't hear it. Though he had left wait, I lost my place. Sorry about that. And he stopped beside an open space that appeared to be a walk. By the time he turned to look at Ethel, she had left the car, closing the door softly, so softly that Pete didn't hear it, though he was sure he caught her muttering words of parting. "Good night, and many thanks." Waking to the fact that the little girl was gone, Pete hurriedly back the car so that the bright headlights shone along the path to the house to guide Ethel there. But she must have reached the house by then, for Pete could not sight her in the thickening swirl of snow. All that he saw was the dim glow from the light of the house, and as he stopped the car abruptly rather than back into the hidden ditch. The jolt awakened Bert, who popped up from the back seat, staring wildly, and asked, Where are we? Off the road? Out in the middle of nowhere? I figured we would lose our way. We haven't lost it yet," Pete interrupted a bit testily. Just watch how fast I pick it up from here. He swung the car back to the road, giving a last glance through the snowy darkness, in time to see the light of the house fade from view. Then he took the sharp turn through the covered bridge, which rattled behind him as he roared out the other end. Another swerve again brought Bert to life with the query, "What was that?" "A covered bridge," returned Pete, "and this is the road we came from. Soon we'll hit the railroad crossing." Oh, they didn't hit the crossing. Instead, the road that Pete followed became increasingly unfamiliar. He took random turns, hoping that they would lead to something better, but they didn't. Pete knew by then that he had really lost the way, but he didn't have to admit it, for Bert had gone back to sleep. Pete simply kept on, hoping that the storm would lessen, which it finally did. He came to an obscure crossroad where a snow-capped sign pointed to the town of Lansford, which was a help because the town was on Route 44. Pete knew this route led off from the Upstate Parkway. He followed the sign into Lansford, and there his problems ended. At last he was on Route 44, which led to Iron Mountain Lodge, although it was a long way around. After an hour's drive, during which the snowfall ended completely, Pete pulled up in front of the lodge, which was aglow with lights. Then Pete reached over to the back seat and gave Bert a solid punch with the admonition, "Wake up, we're there." "Where?" Bert came out of his doze in a bewildered fashion. "You mean we're lost again?" "We're at Iron Mountain Lodge," Pete informed him, and right on the button. Pete didn't add that his quote-unquote shortcut had taken an hour more than the long way around by the parkway. The fact that he had reached his destination was enough. Bert at least was duly impressed, though he couldn't seem to remember any of the details of the long, worrisome, roundabout trip. It was pleasant to be at the lodge amid jolly company, seated in front of a huge fireplace. There was a dining room, a lounge, and a modern guest room, which made the stormy weather and the difficult trip seem very remote. Besides, Pete and Bert were so busy meeting with other sports writers and photographers to think of anything but the ski jumping contest scheduled for the next day. It was nearly dawn when Pete turned in. When he looked out his window across the snowbound mountains etched beneath the clouded moonlight, his mind went back to his meeting with the girl and the drive down through the covered bridge. The only puzzling part was the jingle of those sleigh bells and the subsequent jangle, which had ended when a ghostly train had slicked over the single track. Crossing, but that at least would serve as a starting point from which he could find the snug little house down in the hollow. Pete decided to check the matter at his first opportunity. That opportunity came the next afternoon following a grueling day, not only for ski jumpers, but also for the sports writer, who had to measure the jumps, and the photographers, who had to take pictures of them in mid-flight. Pete, Bert, and a dozen other worn-out representatives of the press were slouched about the lounge trying to recuperate, while Max Boswell, dean of the Manhattan Sports Writers, sounded off in a style as scathing as his daily column. "You softies should have come to the bobsled races back in the old days," Max declared. "No easy drive of a couple of hours up to a plush hotel like this, with every modern convenience including telephones, television, and picture postcards. No, indeedy, it was an overnight hop by sleeper, and at the finish you were at the other end of nowhere, living in a bunk room where a moose was likely to poke its head in and honk you awake in the morning, except that the window was too small for his horns. They didn't have picture postcards because the place was so remote. It would have cost $50 postage to mail one home." Max finished his coffee with a deep basso gurgle, and he inquired, "Did any of you inhuman products of the jet age ever take an overnight hop on a sleeping car? Did you ever experience a torture equaled only by a one-way passage on an Australian convict ship? Would any of you—" "I would," Pete put in before Max could finish. "I would have traded in my car for an upper berth on a sleeper just last night when I stopped at a crossing to let a train go by. You see, I was lost and the train wasn't. And those sleepers, at least they were headed somewhere, but I wasn't." "What sleepers?" Max demanded. Wait now. They still run them on the main line to Chicago? So you stopped at a grade crossing on the main line, except it doesn't have any grade crossings. They got rid of them long ago." "And this wasn't the main line," Peter interrupted, "because I had only a single track. What was more, the train was an old steam locomotive, and they got rid of them long ago too," put in Max, "even on the branch lines. Am I right, boys?" He turned to the other newspaper men, who chorused their agreement that threw the burden on Pete. He had to tell the story to prove his case. So he told it. Pete began with the jangling bells and that turned to the jingling bells that turned to jangles, and the ghost train slithering through the lurid red lights of the crossing. He told of the girl, how he had taken her down through the covered bridge to her father's house. He described the return trip, and the clincher he added, "Bert Carey here will confirm all that I've told you." There was a momentary hush that reminded Pete Dunning of a vast vacuum. What a wonderful break Pete Dunning had given to Bert Carey. The moment that Bert nodded his agreement, he would be in, too, as a partner in a strange, almost fantastic adventure. But just then, Bert, instead of nodding, decided to speak his piece. "It was a swell story, Pete," Bert declared. "So good that you should win a grand prize put up by the National Liars Association. Do you know, boys?" Bert swung to the group. "The way Pete told it, he almost had me believing it." "But Bert," exclaimed Pete, "you should believe it. You were there with me. You saw and heard everything." "I heard you talk about things," Bert put in. "You said you heard bells jingling, so I started singing Jingle Bells, remember? Then I heard a noise like a train." "That's right, Bert, and you saw it." "I saw some trucks, Pete, probably those that we both saw coming across the bridge a little earlier." "Do you remember the girl in the house?" "What girl, Pete? What house?" "The girl who waved for us to stop and asked me to take her home to her sick father, which I did." You mean when we began singing, I was seeing Nellie home?" "Sure, I remember that part, Pete, but I don't remember any girl being with us. I thought we were just singing to cheer ourselves up." "But I showed you the house, or at least its lights." "You mean when you almost backed us into a ditch, Pete? I saw the reflection of our headlights from a snowbank when you swung the car around, but that was all." "Don't you remember coming through the covered bridge?" "I remember hearing something rattle, but it could have been any of those 50 rickety bridges or broken down culverts we crossed, trying to find our way back to the right road." Everyone laughed and heartily at Pete's expense, with one exception. That was Max Boswell, whose face shone a solemn, sympathetic expression. Pete put an appeal to Max. "Believe me, I'd just like to get back there and prove it." "I believe you, boy," Max nodded, "but you would have to go a long way back to find a steam engine room in this country." "But I did see one." "Then you must have gone a long way back. Maybe to the 1930s, or even the Roaring '20s. Maybe even before that, when Jingle Bells was the national number one hit, the national one song hit." I'm sorry, Pete, Bert began. Maybe I was just asleep or dopey. Anyways, I'm willing to believe you. I'll bet, snapped Pete. I was dumb to bring this thing up, so skip it, but I'd like to drive back over those side roads in broad daylight, taking you along, Mr. Wise Guy, to show you all the things I talked about. Pete's chance came when the editor of the Classic called him by long distance the next evening. We're going to stop it here. What did I do with my bookmark? Oh, there it is. We have been reading. Okay, well, we still have a long way to go with the Ghost Train. Okay. Anyways, we've been reading from Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 Unforgettable Explorations into the Realm of the Supernatural, adapted by Walter B. Gibson, and specifically, we've been reading The Ghost Train. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe, ring the bell so you know I upload. Also, want to support me in any way, if you want to join the Discord server, all information will be in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.